Yeah, well, racism has always been held up by the law. It's always
Mm,
been hidden and protected by law. And we continuously see that now. People have to recognize what right wing conservatives, right wing extremists have been doing. This has been part of their plan all along, frankly, but of course they wait for moments to ramp it up. And this narrative around critical race theory has given them the ability to do that. There are a few things that I worry about here. The first big thing that I worry about is you noted about the diversity of the school system. Let's play this out.
right.
I think this is going to be more likely to occur, meaning the accreditation issues in more racially diverse areas, which means places where there are
Mm,
more black students, where there are more Latino students, also where there are more potentially more low income white students. Let's
right.
play out the next scenario. These kids are going to be going to college. And now they're going to college from a high school where the accreditation has been lowered. As a university
Mm,
professor, I can tell you that when you get to that level, we do not play when accreditations have been lowered. It will diminish your child's
wow.
grades, your child's degree, and their ability to go on to college and end up doing what they hopefully can find and enjoy that they might want to do and end up making some money and trying to make a difference in the world. The other thing, I did an analysis with one of my colleagues, Alexandra Gibbons, at the Brookings Institution. And one of the big things we found, and Oklahoma was one of the central ones, so this is surprising to me,
Mm,
that a lot of the original legislation that was supposedly targeting critical race theory did not mention the phrase at all. Let me repeat that. It did
wow.
not mention the phrase at all.
Wow.
Instead, the legislation talked about making people uncomfortable and then also listed a series of words that cannot be used. I could tell people as an educator, as a professor, it is nearly impossible to talk about inequality and racism without using some of the words that were
Mm,
banned because these concepts are concepts that have been used for decades. They are
right.
built into the literature, built into the lexicon, not to make even anyone feel uncomfortable, but to tell the true side of history. So we have to be very careful here about what is happening. And I think there are huge implications. And let's do the feedback loop. So the feedback loop is now you're going to have a group of kids going to college. The accreditation has been lowered. It's going to be more difficult for them to get into college. And now you're going to have parents in that town who are actually for doing implicit bias trainings and learning about diversity because they probably experienced racial discrimination and gender discrimination at work and in schools. Now they're going to back away from that. So it's just
Mm,
another ploy to prevent us from being able to speak truth to power, and it's been effective since the beginning of the founding of this country. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, look, make no mistake, there are neo Nazis teaching in schools. I mean, it
that's
is
right.
no way to frame it that way. And there are also what I call colorblind white people teaching in schools. That's a
Mm,
majority of them. Individuals who want to live in a world and they have the ability to live in a bubble where racism to them has not existed. And that's because they're on the benefiting end of the racism spectrum. So now all of a sudden, when they are called to have to do an implicit bias training, it brings to bear their own privilege and the
mm,
side of the coin where they are on the oppressor side. And that is something that they do not want to grapple with. I do a lot of these implicit bias trainings. I work with a company out of Indianapolis called Black Onyx Management. They are some of the best that does this and have a series of consultants
mm,
around the country that engage in this type of work. And I can tell you that there's a lot of resistance for people doing this. And your main point here is what do we do about it as black people? Well, look,
yes.
we need to get back to educating ourselves in our own schools. What it could look like as we build up that process or a series of teach-ins like we used to do. I mean, we can even use social media. I do think that there are definitely some people who use social media in that way, but we really have to start getting back to thinking about particular communities. Now, the
Mm,
communities that I'm talking about, thriving black communities, can be better even than the ones that we know about. The Tulsas, that's
mm,
the irony there, right? When we start, I mean, look, we are talking about Black Wall Street and the school district right there are lowering its accreditation because people are learning
mm,
about racism. Just think about that. That's part of the reason why
right.
like Tom Hanks the other day was like, I didn't even know about I didn't know about Tulsa. I didn't know about Black
Right.
Wall Street. And so well-meaning white people have been hidden from this because it's not being taught in schools. See, if you want to have history repeat itself, you don't let people truly know the real history. And that's part of what's happening. So we have to get back to educating ourselves. What does that look like? Forming our own school districts, forming our own schools. I think a lot of that looks like going back through the church. We talked about that last week, the way that the churches are falling behind. I mean, we see that brother up in New York. Brother, stop it, man, stop it. But what we see up
Child, I
there
can't.
with
One day we're
that,
going to have to talk about him just
yeah, I mean,
alone.
look, it's its own show. But I think the point is we need our social institutions, our black social institutions, to get back to educating us and let it be better. Because look, make no mistake, those people who say, "Oh, things were better 100 years ago," no, they weren't actually. No, they weren't. Like we were segregated. A lot of black people were still highly disenfranchised. It was not better. Stop saying that. But you know what? Right now, it can be better because we can merge the opportunities that we have gained from the civil rights movement with that black empowerment agenda that was
Yes.
there in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It is a merger. And I think we really have to think consciously about doing it. And what it's going to take is all these black people who are now gaining access to resources and money to say, I'm going to help build local black communities to create the Harlem Children's Zone, like what Jeffrey Canada did, to create all of these things around the country. In Tulsa, don't rely on that school system to educate your kids. You have seen what it looks like and what they would do. Let's figure out a way how to educate our own kids, and I think we have a blueprint for doing that.
If we want access to the resources and power that we need for us to have Ujima, Umoja, Ujama, Kujichagulia, Nia, Kaumba, and Imani. Those are the Kwanzaa principles for those of you who don't know. Your thoughts, Dr. Ray.
Yeah, well, look, I think first off, when we're talking about our Jewish brothers and sisters, do they experience discrimination? Of course. Do they experience prejudice?
Yes.
Yeah, we know that. When we hear statements like Jews will not replace us, but make no mistake, they receive reparations for what happened to them. And they should have
Oh, damn
received that.
it.
And they
You're so
continue to
right.
receive reparations. The second point
So
is they
right.
were able to come to the United States of America and more or less be white. There are books on this, on how that transition happened. So we got to be careful. Like, the comparison becomes important, but people have to be careful when they're like, why don't we just do what Jewish people do? Well, the real is, they got resources. And you know what? If we got reparations, we will have all of our own stuff too. You also make another great point about HBCUs. Look, one of the reasons why HBCUs are once again becoming the number one educator of black children is because we have a generation of black people that are like, these schools y'all have sent us to, these neighborhoods you got me in where my neighbors stare at me like I'm a deer and treat me like I'm in Get Out, that is not for me. Right, that was you all's dream. That's not my dream. I'm gonna go to a HBCU where I'm empowered and I can see just a whole plethora of black people. It reminds me of this episode of Blackish when Junior was choosing between Stanford and Howard, and he was like, "At
Yeah.
Howard, you can be all kind of different black people." See, black people have never seen that, and those of us who have, we have a different mindset about it. See, the other thing people got to bear in mind is one of the reasons why all of the HBCUs exist is because our schools were not accredited. Therefore, we had to have a pathway, a
Wow.
bridge to predominantly white institutions. So all of these HBCUs were created as black veterans were coming back from World War II and couldn't go to a University of Maryland, couldn't go to a University of Memphis, couldn't go to a UC Berkeley, couldn't go to a University of Michigan. I'm naming all the schools that I went to and that I've been
Yes,
affiliated with
yes.
to let people recognize that people have paved the way and that these HBCUs did what they were supposed to do. If we want to get back to that, there is a blueprint for that. And guess what? We even got more resources and actually we're actually closer to equity than we have been. The final thing I'll say on this front, and this is to the dude Tim, called in talking about, well, can't you vote? See, this is what people don't realize about voting and all these other issues. See, it's about equity. It's about whether or not, it's not about whether or not you can do it if you overcome all these hurdles and jump through a landmine and dive through a tank where you can't breathe for 3 minutes. See, that ain't what we talking about. Equity means all of us are given what we need to have to be able to be successful and that we are treated the same. And if a person, a voting district or a school district over, have more opportunities that we don't have, that is inequality, and that is baked in racism and the historical legacy of redlining and restrictive covenants and housing discrimination and all the things we know. And if we really want to do something about it as black people, the how, like we know the why now, the how, we have a blueprint for that, and we just need to make it happen.